Our Airbnb conversation. We're going to be talking about, as always, how to increase your profits, increase your bookings, increase occupation rates, increase the daily rate for your bookings. And most importantly, we want to make sure that you are earning the income that you're wanting so that you can fire your boss or travel more or bring more income to the things that you really love, whether that be cars, clothes, new houses, extra vacations, all those different kinds of things. And today, I'm specifically wanting to be talking about the so-called summer release by Airbnb, which, as many of you probably found out by now, that every kind of 6 months and maybe every year, 12-month period, they have a summer release and a winter release, which basically means they're updating their platform to bring in more features, to make it more user-friendly, more host-friendly. And we're going to be chatting about that because they've released the beta version in some way. The rollout is happening and they have released some of those features. They're starting to get feedback, and it's just a great opportunity for us to talk about what those features are and how that will impact how we run our Airbnbs, how we search for Airbnbs, and how to make that difference. And I recall I think it was maybe January this year, February, when they released their winter release, I felt incredibly frustrated, actually, on the one hand, because here we are in South Africa, we're in our winter and they call it their summer release. And it just makes me feel again that they're catering for the people who are in the Northern Hemisphere in just their mindset and attitude. They should just call it their May release or their June release, as opposed to their winter release or their summer release in this case. So first and foremost, it always just makes me aware that we are not as significant to them here in the Southern Hemisphere and in South Africa as they might be obviously in America. But so be it. There are some updates and some features which are certainly useful for us to go into, and I want us to look at that. And as always, I'm looking to see how can I be the first to market with some of them, adapt some of them into my listings, because I know that in South Africa, I don't mind so much that there's a lot of other people out there. We know that the number of new hosts and new booking or new listings that are coming to the world, in other words, the supply is increasing. And even though the demand, in other words, the people who need Airbnb places to stay in is also increasing, the rate at which the number of listings is growing is greater than the demand. So we have to be more on the ball, more competitive, and that's what's going to differentiate us. Now, I think that's super important, which is why we're talking about this. Can we take those insights and to bring them to the fore? And here's just a snippet of it. And I'm going to chat about this a little bit later, but I want to give you a sense of what I'm referring to here. The first one that I saw was actually more if you look at the guest side. Now, there's a release for guests and a release for hosts. And I also like looking at what are the features for the travelers, for the guests out there who are looking. Because if I know what they're looking for, maybe I can position myself so that it matches what they're looking for. A while back, I think it was in last year, May, they were bringing to the fore pets. In other words, traveling with pets is on the increase. So if you can be pet friendly, then you want to make sure you are, because that's going to match a growing need of pet friendly places. What was interesting about this latest release from the guest perspective was there are people who are searching for infant friendly places and family friendly places and child friendly, which makes a significant difference. If you're traveling with a group of people or even with infants, I've got cribs in my units, and I often, at least twice a month, get a couple with an infant who are traveling, and they are asking, is your crib like this, or what is it like? Because that is a market. And now there are going to be those features or those ways, those criteria in which someone can filter through and say, I want to be able to just see the child-friendly or especially the infant-friendly units out there, those ones that maybe have changing stations or that they have the cots and the cribs that are close by, that do not have balconies which a young child could fall over. So like this one behind me, that's not really going to do too well from an infant perspective. But actually, I've had a lot of families with infants there, but it might not be on their first wish list. So that's what we want to bring into account. And I've got a list that I want to go through with you in this. What I thought we'd actually look at first, though, just as a general update, we see a whole lot of things coming to the fore. This is our traditional low season. We're in May at the moment, May 2023. It's the first time for me personally this whole year that I had a open night in any of my units. Any of my units was the first time in May was I had this, what they call an orphan night. Because it's orphan because the dates on either side are booked, but it's this tiny little, this night that's open and no one is booking it. That's, we know that it's in our low season. And I think that's where we are. We've seen the trend. We still see a lot of foreigners and travelers coming through South Africa, not just Cape Town. So please don't just come and say, oh, Cape Town is only good for Airbnb because it has tourists and travel. Not at all the case. I'm going up to Johannesburg in a week and a half, and I'm going to be using Airbnb. I booked my places through Airbnb. So there are lots of things that still happen for local domestic. I believe that in booking.com, over 70% of bookings in South Africa are domestic. In other words, that's local people looking for places to stay, and that's in booking.com. If you're not aware yet, we have a whole booking.com section now in our Airbnb courses because we want to make sure we're monetizing all the different spheres of our short-term letting. It's not just Airbnb. I've got a booking tonight that came in today, no, it's an hour ago, for tonight, because I know that over 25% of also a lot of the bookings are on the day of the check-in. So if your listing is not set up to attract or to provide accommodation for someone to book on the day that they want to check in, you're leaving money on the table. And it's actually super interesting that in the booking.com course section module of the Airbnb course, I show you live my listing. I take you onto the booking.com platform. I show you one of my listings and I put in the dates of today. And I say, show me all the available apartments for tonight in my area. And I click it and I'm the only one. And it's not because the other ones are all booked. It's just that those other ones can't handle late last minute bookings, or they can't handle one night only bookings. They can only do a minimum of 2 or 3. So that means I'm going to target and market significantly. I'm going to seek out or position myself for those last minute bookings, and of course for the shorter stay bookings, in other words, one night bookings, because not a lot of people do. Why? Because it's hard work for them. Why? Because they don't have the systems in place. Why? Because they haven't done the course and figured out how they can actually change that. So we know that the moment we can start automating and do things, we're going to change our market because we can now reach that market. And I think that's, for me, significant because that's what I really want. I'm still in Knysna. I'm not in Cape Town. My units are still doing really well in Cape Town. And as many of you know, that's something which I'm really passionate about. Before we go into some of the updates, and I'm going to go over a few of those updates in the next 20 minutes, I've in working with a lot of different students, clients who are starting the Airbnb, those who already have 15, 16, 17 Airbnb, there's a big question around, should I buy an Airbnb? Should I do a rental arbitrage? And a rental arbitrage is where you're renting out a unit from a landlord, from an owner, and you are going to then list it on Airbnb, which is sometimes called subletting it on Airbnb, even though I'd be cautious of saying to the landlord, I want to sublet your unit. I say I would like to list your unit on Airbnb and booking.com. You don't go around saying I want to lease it out to someone else. I want to sublet it. I would say I would like to list this on Airbnb when I'm in a face-to-face conversation with them. So that's a good point to have, or something to bear in mind. But this question about, I want to buy, or should I do rental arbitrage? For me, it's actually a really simple conversation. If you're wanting cash flow, then go for rental arbitrage. If you're wanting to build your asset base, then definitely look at buying. And they are significantly different because in the rental arbitrage, your ability to generate cash flow is way higher because you do not have all the expenses and often the levies and the rates and the taxes and the whole insurance component, and as well as your finance cost if you've got bonds and all of that. Whereas when you're buying, you do. And I would In my books, you have to earn double the Airbnb income you would on a rental arbitrage to make buying a property to Airbnb work. I'll repeat that. In my books, in my experience, I have to generate twice as much income to cover all the costs of a full purchase of a property than if I was just doing rental arbitrage and I wanted to get money. So it puts a bit more pressure on. But at the same time, of course, I'm always looking to get a free property. And I think that's the most important one. So I look for cash flow in a property, but if I don't need the cash flow because I have other businesses that bring cash flow into me and into my businesses, then I just want to make sure I'm getting free properties, which I'm using Airbnb to do for me. And I just bought another one 2 weeks ago. So super excited about that. I'll probably share a bit more about that over time. But for now, that's what we're looking at. So that's my conversation about buying and doing the rental arbitrage. So just quickly, and of course, because we're live, you always have the opportunity to ask questions and to get my input. So I'm going to go back. We've already got a question here. Like, can a non-SA resident become an Airbnb host in South Africa? 100%, because I've got clients who are doing that right now. So you can also have non-SA residents buy property in South Africa to run on Airbnb. So all those things, definitely you can. It would be pretty similar. You need to just get some of your ducks in a row about the tax scenarios and some of the other legal things in place. But in principle, most certainly. What I'll do as well is I've got a client at the moment from America who is doing exactly that. And I'll just confirm with her what she had to do to make sure that she was compliant, even from an immigration status, just to then share with you as to how that looks. So yes, it can be. You're taking out a lease just like you would a normal lease, and then you're subletting, and we just want to make sure that the logistics, the criteria around your reporting of tax, if that is an issue or not, becomes there, because there will be things like tax withholding in certain situations. I'm not the expert in that, but my answer to you is yes. So feel free to keep asking questions. I'm definitely will go into that, but I want to jump into some of these things that I've noticed. Some of these features I think are super, super interesting, are going to create some traction, and some of them we've already got those handled, and let's go into that. This one, where they say this is for the hosts, for us as hosts, more tools that are available to us. This is an interesting one. They're saying that they are going to provide a map on the apps that will show us comparative listings and their pricings. So this means this comes out of the question, how do I know what price I should put my listing at? So what they're saying is, well, we'll tell you what, we'll show you who all the other units are that are similar to yours that are getting booked, and we'll show you all the similar listings to yours that are not getting booked. And they will then suggest and advise what pricing you can position yours at. Now, from my side, I'm not going to quite do that myself, because I'm going to trust how I do and manage things and check things, because I'm comfortable with that and I know how to do that. And the course explains how to do that comfortably, partly because I know that when I apply the skills and the techniques and the tips that we teach and learn, I can generate more than 20% more bookings and income than the average listing out there. So I'm not going to go with what they advise, but this is interesting because it will give us some kind of a benchmark to go against. The way I check it is I very simply go as a user onto Airbnb. I say, here is my area, here is the number of guests or the number of rooms I've got, and I look to see, there's mine and there are all others, and I get a sense of, am I competitive or not? Who is more expensive? How many reviews do they have? And I do that internally. So this might help. It won't initially help me directly, but it's something that could give us more data and information. So I think that is useful for us to take into account. Right, one of the other benefits that we're seeing, just waiting for it to load, built-in checkout instructions. So this again is really interesting, is where I think Airbnb was not successful in the past is in their messaging, in their automated messaging, and in this communication between guest and the host. I've, from day one, used channel, or not quite from day one, as a professional investor. My mindset, as soon as I shifted to being a professional investor, even though I had one unit at that time, I used the channel manager, which automated all my messaging. And I had huge flexibility in when I could message, to whom I could message, what time of the day I could message, how many days before check-in, how many days during check-in, how many days after check-in. All this flexibility I could manage and work on. And based on that, I could automate extensive messaging, which was fantastic. Airbnb has slowly started doing that, slowly started increasing their ability to do good messaging. And now we're actually seeing more of that. We're seeing where they're saying, like you can see on the screen here, we are providing hosts, which therefore means guests, clarity on the check-in instructions, which they've already got. Now they're doing the check-out instructions, because there might be some things that your guests have to do. Put rubbish out, put keys here, wash the dishes, turn off the lights, turn off the geyser, whatever it is that you're wanting. Airbnb is saying this feature is important, so that guests know what they must do, not only to check in, but to check out. And that is something which they're putting there, which is great. But if you've already got, like I have a channel manager, which does all that, not automatically, but I can set it up to do so, then that's creating that advantage already. I like this one. So now we can see when a guest has read our message. I find one of the biggest challenges traditionally in the Airbnb is I don't know when my guest has seen my message. Have they seen my message? So that's really important. One thing I wish they would do is they could be able to tell me that my guest has arrived, because I don't want to sit there wondering, have they arrived? Haven't they arrived? Are they going to arrive? I would love to be able, for some way that as soon as there's something that triggers, like, hey, your guests are there, that is sorted. Now I have that because I first had it with cameras showing outside my front door that would detect motion. And when the motion came, it notified me. So I had on my app that, oh, someone is in front of my front door. And now I knew who had arrived. That was fantastic. The next thing I did is I actually got those smart locks that a guest has a specific code. And when the guest uses that code, I get notified and I'm like, hey, John has just opened the front door. Now I know John has arrived. So I've figured out other ways to know who has arrived or who hasn't arrived, and how I can then sleep better at night, because I do care. As much as I might come across as someone who's all about systems and automation and just like punch the numbers and make it work, I can also sit there like, well, what happens if they don't arrive? What happens if they didn't have internet? What happens if they didn't read the instructions correctly? Now they're sitting there, like the one time I was in Indonesia surfing. I think we were 6 or 9 hours ahead. One guy booked at 10 o'clock at night for that night, went to the apartment at 11 o'clock, struggled to get in. He was phoning me, but I'm in Indonesia surfing and was the middle of the night, well, early morning there, and we missed each other. And so it does it. It sits on me if that isn't as streamlined as possible. So in this case, having inbox read receipts give us a sense of someone seen it. That's good, especially for those of you who had that experience where, man, hey, Robin, we're here by the apartment, but we can't get in. My first question is, did you receive and read the check-in instructions? That's what you must ask first. And when they say no, it's like, well, how do you expect to know how to get in if you didn't read it? No, I can't be sarcastic to them on the phone. So at least I can now get a sense of, well, if you're doing it this way, you can get a sense of when your guest has read, not arrived, read your check-in or your messages. So that's really useful. So I like that little touch that they've got there. Good. The next one, co-host permissions and payouts. So I don't use co-hosts significantly at all, but I know that this is a big thing for a lot of people. It helps, especially if you're wanting to be a hands-off host as much as possible. But I believe there are a whole lot of additions here to the co-hosting model, which allows more flexibility for you to give your co-host permissions of what they can see, can't do, can change, can't change. So it just adds that wealth of variability and versatility if you're using co-hosts to help you. So for those of you who might not understand a co-host, you would be a host, and then you have a co-host who can also support and access you in doing certain things. So when I went to Vietnam in March this year, and I spent up to a week offline totally because I was deep under the caves. You know, in Vietnam, those were the biggest caves in the world. For many of you who know that I'm passionate about my bucket list and exploring these things, and what a spectacular experience. but I was totally off grid. I had a co-host during that time who could still read all my messages, sort out check-in instructions or stuff if stuff didn't happen correctly, or answer guest messages, or amend bookings, or accept bookings if that is the case. So that's where the co-host becomes very useful. And some people are using it increasingly. So we're finding that a lot of owners of properties are looking for Airbnb as a model to invest in, but don't want to do it themselves. So a co-host can also be a bit like, I'm getting someone to manage my property. And in this case, that would be a co-host for many people. So that's an interesting one that comes out of that. One of the next benefits, we're still on what are the benefits to the host? What are the features that are there? A massive one, and I think this is actually twofold, rooms and spaces. There's a strong drive, and I've got a couple of insights into this, why this is something that's so important and useful, is Airbnb started when Brian and his mates, the founders, realized that they were going to go away from their unit to go visit their parents for Christmas and for Thanksgiving or whatever they were doing. And they thought, well, maybe we can let out our place, our air mattress. That was how it started. Our air mattress to be on the kitchen, and at least we could generate some money. So Airbnb started primarily from, I have extra space in my house. It would be great if I could let out a bed. In this case, we're talking about a room perhaps, and then I could make some money on the side. It grew significantly into more than just from rooms, into units, houses, apartments. Then hotels came on board and are listing their rooms on Airbnb. And I feel that Airbnb is realizing that there's a market that no one else has, which is rooms, shared spaces within a private unit. So it might be you have a house and you've got a spare room. Why not get someone else to come in who can rent that room for you? They still are in your space, but they're renting the room and you can earn money. So instead of it being a separate entrance necessarily as a separate unit, it's someone who goes into that space. Now in America, it's huge. I've done so much traveling through this model where I'm using the same door. Sometimes it's a shared bathroom with the kids. It could be a shared bathroom with other people in, for example, Disney World or Disneyland throughout the States. This is a huge model that you have like a 6-bedroom house, and each room in the house is listed on Airbnb, and the kitchen is communal, the lounge is communal, and then you just have a room which you have privacy in. So they're driving this rooms again. And I think it's because it's a market that they dominate in, and they want to make sure that whatever happens in the world out there in the competitor space, they can still dominate this private room space. What's super interesting is with this room space challenges is, well, how do I know the host is legit? How do I know it's going to be safe? So that's where they're talking about, well, we're including this passport, a host passport. If you go onto Airbnb now and you take a look, you will see rooms come up and you'll see the photo of the host, and you'll see a string of information about that host. You can get a sense of who they are, their background, what music they like, a whole lot of information, because they know that this is super important. You're going into someone else's space and you need to be able to trust them. At the same time, vice versa, you as the guest can actually now include a whole lot more about you so that your host feels comfortable with you coming to them. So I'm not so interested in this model. And my reasoning is that here in South Africa, I feel that the security factor is such a huge issue. I'm not saying this can't work. I know people who are making this room scenario work. From an investing perspective, well, maybe if it's your primary home, but I'm not interested in just one home. I want to have different units and to be able to not be there and to travel. So my use of how I'm looking to grow this as a scalable business, the room scenario, I don't think is the answer, but that might be different to you. It's not my answer. Take into account in South Africa, I don't think it's as strong as in the rest of the world. And even though it might be trending this way or they're pushing that way, I just think that it's something else which we need to be aware of. So it's not my favorite, but I do notice that they're pushing for that. Okay. One of the other features that we see, here I've actually just mentioned 4 others. I think there were about 25. And I just wanted to, for today's conversation, bring in the ones that I thought were the most important ones. And here I've put 4 on in one go. We've got here identity verification of guests. This was a big one for us because, in my case, I had always ticked the box that said my guests must have government ID verified before they can book in my place, because I wanted to have that level of security there. And it looks like now that they are doing this mandatory for all the different Airbnb people, because what would sometimes happen is you'd have a guest who would create an account, who would then kind of spam or maybe do something, damage a place. They would get banned, or they would be held accountable for it. They would delete their account and they would just use a new email and a new name, because there was no verification of identification which happened. And now with this, it will decrease that. We saw it a lot. There was a phase at which a lot of people who were looking to co-host with other people or looking for rent-to-rents, where they would message you and say, hey, have you thought about co-hosting? I can help you improve your listing. And Airbnb would ban that person, but then they would just reapply because their identity didn't have to be verified. So the fact that it's being verified now is going to make a big difference, just for the spamming and for us to be able to trust our guests, and in some way an accountability would increase. So to the right of that, I did mention more detailed guest profiles. One of those things which I kind of do when I have a suspicious feeling that there's something a bit off about a guest is I just want to know more about them. Especially, have they broken house rules? For me, that's a big one. I had 2 days ago someone who brought a pet into the apartment, and I've got very strict building regulations as to no pets. So that is significant. I can't have someone who goes around just breaking rules, even though they might have good other reviews. It's worthwhile reading a bit more about them. So I do like the idea about having more information about the guests that are coming. We chatted a bit about it, so that's a really big one, just understanding more around how we can get support. And this other one about the worldwide reservation screening is also significant and important, because my alarm bells usually go off if I have a single night booking for the maximum occupancy rate of people on a Friday or a Saturday. That for me just tells me alarm bells of they come in here for some kind of a social event, and I want to reach out and ask them what's going on. So obviously, because Friday and Saturday are the traditional, people are off work and can have events. In my one unit, because I can have 6 people there, it's 3 bedrooms. Well, they're going to max that out, because probably out of that party, 6 people will sleep over, but probably more. But it doesn't say don't have a party. And even though I've got the house rules that they have to tick to say they've read them, I still get nervous. So I had one just 3 days ago where that's what he booked. I reached out to him just to confirm. So I'm very diplomatic. I say, hey, I've just noticed that on the Friday so-and-so that I have 6 people booked, and I just want to confirm, as part of our single night booking policy, that you can confirm with me that there are no events going to be here, no social gatherings, that there are just 6 of you coming and 6 of you sleeping over. Please confirm. And he came back and said, oh, I was going to have a few friends over. And that's what I was looking for. And I got him to say this through the Airbnb app platform, not on WhatsApp, because I need Airbnb to see this so that I can cancel it. And I phoned Airbnb and I said, listen, you can see he's going to have a party. Please cancel this booking. And they did. They canceled it. No penalty to me. No penalty. Well, no. And I was happy, and the guest got refunded. It wasn't about that. It was just like, I don't want this person there. Please cancel us from their side. Because the guest wanted me to cancel. I'm like, no way am I going to cancel that, because then I get penalized and I get a bad track record. So I said, no, someone else must do that. So that's a significant component. So now Airbnb has implemented and devised a serious algorithm where they start looking at a whole lot of factors to determine, does this look like a party scenario? So for example, if someone books a place just down the road from where they live, Airbnb is going to look at where is your IP address from your computer to where you're booking from. And if it's so close, it's like, why would you be booking a place so close to your house if you're just going to take a night out? So they've developed this algorithm, and they're going to now roll it out worldwide. They've tested it in different regions, and that should seriously help us prevent parties and damage issues that are going to happen. So I'm really, really excited about that. Just chatting here, the one thing that I realized I haven't mentioned, but for most of us is probably one of the most important aspects, is the ability for us to mitigate or to ask Airbnb to take off a review which is not appropriate. Now, what I mean by not appropriate is, let's say that your guest broke your house rules, they've had a party, so you told them, listen, you can't have a party here, I need you to stop this party, or you need to move out, or I'm going to call security. And part of our concern as hosts is they're going to leave us a bad review and then it impacts us. So we kind of tolerate so much crap from guests. Where Airbnb is now saying that no matter how long ago it happened, so this could have even been 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you can go back to that bad review and you can say to Airbnb, look at what happened. They broke the rules. Please withdraw and take off this review so it doesn't impact me. So that applies currently moving forward, but also retrospectively, you can go and get that struck out, taken off your profile, which is significant because that gives us a bit more clout. If someone breaks the rule, we can actually engage them and say, guys, no party. If you do not leave or you do not stop this now, I will be doing this or I will be doing that. And if they come back and leave something terrible, like the guest, the host was so rude, now we can ask Airbnb to strike that, to remove it, which again is why you want to make sure that you are messaging any challenge, problem, damage through the platform, not on WhatsApp. So I do most of mine on WhatsApp, my communication, but the moment I see that there's a problem or anything that I want a record, a history of, I make sure I go back into the platform and then I will answer that there. And if the guest answers that on WhatsApp, I'll say, please, let's just keep this conversation in Airbnb platform or the booking.com platform so that we have a history of it there, please. Because that's super important. Because if you get on the phone call with customer service of Airbnb, I want them to be able to read the guest who said, oh, yes, sorry, I brought the pet in, which is what happened. And then I can charge that guest extra cleaning fees. Because in this case, they had a pet. And even though the cleaner said to me they couldn't see any proof of the pet being there, I said, deep clean, go for it, because I can't have hairs with some person who's allergic to pets, who thinks that this is a no pet building, and then they get allergies because it's just not what we can see. So I said, do a deep clean, and then I could go to Airbnb and say, they broke the rule, they brought a pet, I had to do deep clean, here's the charge, and they must pay that back. Give me the air cover. So that's why, again, that platform is so important for us to look at and to go through. Okay, let's see one of the other ones I mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation, and I can still see we don't have any more questions from the chat coming through. So please, if you've got a question or an insight or something, please put it down there so that I can answer. We chatted about this is from the guest perspective. So they are now going to have criteria or filters that will show kid-friendly homes, infant-friendly homes, and I discussed a bit about the Airbnb rooms and now the bathrooms, because one of the biggest things is I don't mind having an Airbnb room, but what about the bathroom? Is it shared with the rest of the family? Am I going to be having to wait in line? Am I going to have to be so conscious that someone else is going to be in the same room, like straight after me, the bathroom? So it looks like there also now you can find a room and a filter which says it's ensuite or it's just for you or it's shared. Those kinds of things are super important, and I think that's what they're pushing and putting into their process there. Okay, great. So that's that one. So let me come back to here. So there are a whole lot of different of these so-called updates, features which Airbnb is bringing in their so-called summer or winter release. I think some of them are definitely going to improve things. In many ways, the channel managers that we use are already doing a whole lot of that. What I would do is, even though my check-in instructions, my checkout instructions, because I have that through picture sequence as well as video sequence as well as step-by-step sequence, how I'm going to use this, I'm going to go into the Airbnb feature where it has checkout, and I'll say, please see, or these details will be sent to you via the platform messaging. You know, I won't just leave them blank. I will fill in where the guest can find them. You will be sent a step-by-step picture sequence of the checkout instructions. So I will just add that layer in so that it can be useful to them as well, as opposed to just leaving it blank because it's covered somewhere else. I want Airbnb or Booking.com to still acknowledge in their algorithms, whether it's important or not, that I am still like doing those things, because they don't know that I'm doing them because I'm using the channel manager. I want them to still see that I have gone in and filled in those fields, even though the fields, the descriptions is, we will send this to you the day before your checkout. You will receive it via a link and a picture. So that just gives that there as well. So it's a good one for us to do. So last chance, any final questions before we wrap this up and get going? The last thing about that Airbnb release, I'm not actually quite sure when it's formally going to be rolled out. Like I mentioned, you can get early access to it as a host, so you can test it and you can tweak it and figure it out and give Airbnb feedback as to what works, what doesn't work. But for now, that is where it is. I'm sure they will roll them out again. I heard, which was quite interesting, that a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, 2 weeks ago, that during this update, the platform crashed. So Airbnb went down and then it kind of went up and down, up and down. I didn't notice it. Maybe it's because I'm not online trying to keep messaging and going to check this, because so much of it is automated. So remember, you want to have heavily automated and systemized so that it doesn't become this massive job for you. You want it to be a side hustle, but not a job. And if you do go full-time into Airbnb, and I've got some clients and guests, clients and students who do that, and they've got their 15 to 20 Airbnbs already, and they're full-time in this. They've got now assistants who manage the whole Airbnb portfolio because they self-managed internally. They don't hand it over to a rental agent as such. And yeah, that's all going to be important in how we manage and these updates. So that's where they're moving towards, and of course they're going to use that automation that we've been talking about and relying on that. So whether you're part-time, full-time, nerding out on all the different variables and insights, this is that opportunity for you to take advantage of that. So last time for questions, otherwise I'm going to head this off. I do predict that we probably will have a low, I think a May and a June are going to be our low times, just in general, all the way around. We know that, we factor that in. Just to give you a sense, my kind of drive is for the 4 months of low season, I don't want to lose any money. So it must pay for itself, even if it's a bought property, right? So even in the low season, we would still traditionally rent-to-rent make more, like we'd make profit. In buying a property, I don't want to lose money. So my one unit, for example, I have to generate 55,000 Rand net income to cover the bond rates and taxes and levies in the low season. So I still have to do it, but then in the high season, I will generate between 90 to 110,000 Rand. So that's where that makes all that profit up, but I'm not losing anything during those 4 months of the low season. So those are the kinds of statistics just to share with you that I'm looking at in my units. Okay, we don't see anything else coming up there. So wishing everyone the best. What I see again and again and again are the people who are getting success and moving forward, are they just taking action. It's just so interesting. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the Facebook group that I would share some of the testimonials of people who are making waves in creating that wealth and income for themselves. I've collated some of their stories. I'm going to be posting it on the pages, so definitely take a look at that. And I asked them all a question. If you earned between 15,000 to 30,000 Rand per month, how quickly could you replace that with Airbnb income? In other words, how could you fire your boss? How quickly and how many units? And all of them that I interviewed said within 2 months with 2 units, within 2 months and 2 units, you could earn between 15 and 30,000 Rand on average, right? Just obviously you can do a lot more. Some of our students earned 500,000 Rand on one property just in December alone. So, yeah. But they said, if you do that 2 months, 2 units, you could earn between 15 and 30,000 Rand in that range. If that's what you earned as a salary, you could fire your boss, and therefore whatever you had, the third, the fourth, the fifth, becomes an increasing salary paycheck to you. So that just shows, again, this is such a great opportunity. I always said you've got to get in there sooner than later, because we're seeing this more and more people shifting to Airbnb. They're still incompetent at it, which means we've got a huge advantage. But I want to keep taking advantage of that advantage. So that's where I'm always passionate about. So excellent. Thanks for some of the feedback around what we've been chatting about, and that gives you some clarity. As it rolls out and as we see the impact of that, we'll keep you updated. I'm curious to see what the algorithms change now. If we still listed first, if we still get the same bookings, yeah, it may very well be that, like I said, this is our low season. It's the first time that I've had orphan nights that are not booked in May. And maybe it's because the algorithms changed and they have to tweak something. And that's my job, is always to go out there to find what that tweak is so I can implement it and get back to really dominating and creating that passive income as much as possible. So keep tuned, because that's what we share here. We'll come again, I think, in about 2 weeks' time, and again expand on all these different insights that we've got. So from my side, have a good afternoon, and I will definitely see you all in 2 weeks' time.